Hi everyone, welcome to Talk Back. It is September 11th, 2024, and I just realized it's 9/11. It's the anniversary of 9/11. And I'm thinking I have the perfect guest for today. Why? Well, first, let's take a second to honor the lives of those we lost on 9/11. And also, let's remember, I think, the way our country came together on 9/11, the way we all felt as Americans. We were in it together, and we've lost that a little bit, and we've got a contentious election now. So how can my guest help? Well, what do they say about art, music, theater, all of the decorative arts? They help to inspire us. They help to put up a mirror to our lives, to our humanity. They bring people together. And our guest is an artist. If you go to her exhibition that we'll talk about, you will be soothed. You'll see beautiful light. You'll see beauty. You'll be inspired. You'll be quiet. And it will unite us all. So, having said that, today, I want to introduce Vivian Zoe. Hi, Vivian.
Hi, Sheila.
Hi.
Thank you for having me.
Yes, it's great. And to tell everyone that you have the exhibition out of your artwork at Three Rivers. There was a lovely opening last week, but the show extends until October 7th.
That's correct.
And people can get to the galleries at Three Rivers, which is easy to get to in Norwich. They can spend as much time as they want taking a look at about 20 or more of your works. So tell us about yourself. I know you used to be the director of the Slater Museum in Norwich, and you have a career going way back in the arts. So tell us, why is art important to you, and how did you become an artist in your own right, in your own personal way?
Well, art has been important to me since I was a little kid, really. And, you know, I was always drawing and making art. And I had a few lessons as a kid. There was a really strange guy up the road who had a studio in an outbuilding in one of the old houses. I grew up in East Windsor, which has a lot of old stately homes, and some of them have extended buildings and things, and he had a studio in there and gave classes for everyone, young people, older people. And honestly, I don't remember if my mother paid for those or if he just offered them, but you know, I would go there and be inspired. And then as a student in high school, actually my high school, East Windsor High School at the time, was really, really small. So I think there were like 95 kids in my graduating class, so that's how small it was. So you would potentially have the same, for example, the same French teacher for more than 1 year, and I had the same art teacher for many years, because in addition to its being a high school, it was also what was called then junior high. So you went 7th, 8th, 9th, 10th, you know, all the way to 12th grade. Mrs. Hyde, may she forever be remembered. She was fabulous and very much an artist of the sort of old school of watercolor painting. She was so skilled, and I absolutely loved watching her paint. So, you know, I was inspired by that, and she thought I was great. So that helped. It was a place of refuge for me. I really enjoyed being in the art room. And initially, I was actually going to major in French. My mother thought that was a good idea because I could be a translator at the UN. I think she had this notion of me being a translator at the UN. But I switched to fine art, and I'm not unhappy that I did that. So I did a Bachelor of Fine Arts at UConn. And then I did some teaching, although that was not my goal. But I discovered I really enjoyed teaching. And so, you know, I did some adult ed, I did some teaching at high schools and things like that. And actually had always designed clothing and was good at sewing. It was a way to expand my wardrobe. and be creative with what I wore. And so I sort of little by little got recruited by friends who were in theater, and I started doing costume design. So I ended up at Ohio State in the MFA program in costume design, and then started getting jobs in like managing galleries and things like that in the local, sort of the nonprofit world, and thought, I really do enjoy this, but my skill levels are not that great in management. So I went back to school to get a master's degree in arts administration and community art ed. And, all the time I would be occasionally working on my own art, particularly when I traveled or when I was on vacation and that sort of thing, and was, creative with things like how I decorated my home. But the goal truly was, when I retired from working full-time, that I would focus on working in my studio, which is what I've been doing.
Yeah, and when you first became interested in art, and your teacher was a great mentor for you, did you have a favorite style, a favorite artist? I'm sure you took the class.
I was all over the map.
Okay.
And when we get to the slides, I'll show you some early stuff. It's an interesting question, because when I got to UConn, first of all, almost all of the art profs were men, and almost all of them were Yaleys. And they didn't treat the female students very well. They thought we were all there to get our MRS degrees.
Oh, so we're dating ourselves with
We're
that
dating
comment.
ourselves, absolutely. And abstraction and expressionism was truly the rage. Talk about dating myself.
Right.
So if you did anything representational, it was viewed as purely an exercise, an academic exercise. I mean, you had to take I have to say then, and I don't think this is the case anymore for the Bachelor of Fine Arts, you had to take drawing every semester, even your last semester when you would be working on your thesis project. You had to take drawing, and you would start with still life drawing and that sort of thing, but then it quickly moved on to life drawing, and you had to take it every semester. So that's an academic approach that I think is being lost. It's really fortunate for the area that we still have the Lyme Academy of Fine Art, which is very academic, and by academic I mean very, very representational, almost scientifically representational. And while I don't strive for that in my work now, that foundation is really important. I would liken it to, for example, a dancer needing the foundation in ballet technique to be able to do modern dance.
Okay. So I think of the trajectory of someone like a Picasso, who went from his early work to his later work. It was a huge variety from beginning to end.
And that's a great example. And
Yeah.
you can think of even Jackson Pollock, for example, who studied under Thomas Hart Benton. We all know Thomas Hart Benton.
The big landscape.
Not only landscapes, but very what was then called socialist realism.
Okay.
And Thomas Hart Benton benefited very much from the arts program of the WPA, where many murals were commissioned all around the country.
We're talking about in the 1930s in the FDR administration.
In the 1930s and even into the 40s. So if you go into, even in Norwich, in the main branch of the post office, there's a lovely historic narrative mural,
Right.
and that was part of the WPA.
Yeah.
So that's how Thomas Hart Benton supported himself.
But Pollock, he's the guy who threw the paint at the wall.
Threw the
right?
paint, well, not on the wall,
On the floor,
actually
on the floor, right.
on the floor.
floor.
And
Right.
he had Peggy Guggenheim was his champion and made it possible for
So
him.
it just shows you that there is an enormous trajectory that one can start with and then move
Exactly.
to what I guess best defines them. So you love watercolors. Is that your favorite mode of painting?
Oils,
oils
mostly.
more?
I mean, I do watercolor, and watercolor is great when you travel because you can get a little teeny weeny kit, and it's very portable, and you know and you just need a little water, and the kit, if you buy it in cakes, let me just say to everybody, buy good ones, because some of it is just the cheap junk that they give to kids, which I think is almost child abuse. But you can take it with you wherever you go. The cakes dry up, you can close up the kit and get on the plane, and you're good to go. Oil painting, and you know, I sort of use traditional methods, and those are sort of frowned on these days because everybody wants new materials and stuff. And every time I go to the art supply store, I see stuff that I say, maybe I should try that, but I usually go back to.
Yeah.
In fact, I have a kind of funny story relative to that. I was teaching adult ed in Vernon, and this was when I was living in Hartford and working in Hartford. And so it was a schlep to get there. It was a couple of times a week. And they assign you a classroom. You don't get to choose where you go. And apparently it was the classroom of a high school art teacher. And she literally called me at my day job, which was quite a demanding day job and not the kind of thing where you would have time to deal with a hysterical teacher, and said, "What are you using? My classroom stinks," and all of this kind of stuff. And I said, "Well, it's oil paint. You know, it does kind of stink." And you know, I asked her, "Where did you go to art school? Did you never study, you know, traditional oil painting methods?" So they made me get the MSDS sheets, which are the, you know, federal regulation sheets.
They didn't smell.
The sheets?
No.
And I brought that to the office and made copies for everybody, distributed the copies. I mean, this was like a stack like this. And you know, I said to the students, adult students, either you can read all of that, or just take my advice, don't eat it. Which is basically, you know, I mean, I've probably poisoned myself, who knows. But.
So before we get to your work, which we want to explore with a good little slideshow, and let people know what they were going to see when they go to the show at the Three Rivers, just want to ask you a couple of questions. And you don't need a lot of thinking. It's like not even multiple choice. Just, you're at the Metropolitan Museum of Art in New York. What are the 3 paintings you're going to tell me I have to go see? Before I die, I have to see those 3.
Oh, my.
Name 3.
At the Met. That's like that would be a you know, the test that they give to people who want to enter the program to get your teaching certificate after the fact, to become enter that program to go on the fast track to become a teacher. You know, I'm off the top of my head, there are so many thousands of paintings in the Met that I'm not sure that I could tell you that. But I will say this, the last show I saw there was the Harlem Renaissance exhibition. I don't know if it's still there, but it was so fabulous. Jacob Lawrence, you know, people who got basically no formal training and yet created works of such emotional power and beauty and, you know, even technique on their own.
Okay, I'll ask it a different way. If you could, without any cost, get as a prize, take 1 painting from any museum in the world and put it on your wall, what would it be? Or a couple?
It would probably, it's something that I could live with for a long time. Maybe something by a French, sort of an impressionist, Caillebotte, who did scenes of sort of everyday life, street scenes, people working. There's one very, very famous, well-loved painting of men by hand scraping a wood floor to refinish it. Maybe something from Millet or Courbet. Those were sort of Barbizon school naturalist painters, and they saw themselves, they were called realists, even though we wouldn't look at it and say that's particularly realistic. And the reason they called themselves realists is because they painted people gleaning in the fields or picking apples, working sort of agricultural jobs.
Okay. So let's get to your work. And I notice in this particular show, there are no people.
There are no people.
There are no people.
I used to do portraits. That was like
Yeah.
all I did.
Right.
And I haven't done
They're
that
mostly
for years.
beautiful scenes, bucolic scenes, beautiful. You call the show In Pursuit of Light. So let's get right to it so we can talk about all of your works. Studio, can you put the slideshow on? That's not the first. Can we go back to the beginning? I think we have. There we go.
There we go.
Vivian, why don't you tell us about this? This is the work that you have on the flyer for your exhibition.
Right, and that painting is called Sunstream. The reproduction of it isn't that great, but I called the show In Pursuit of Light because that's what artists do. That is the struggle. How do I present what I'm actually seeing? And everything we see is obviously a reflection of light. So that's what you're constantly pursuing. Can I do it? How well am I doing it? How am I communicating this to the viewer?
Okay, let's go. Next slide. And that, again, the camera didn't quite, because of the light in that room,
Right.
it didn't quite capture the title In Pursuit of Light by
fine.
Vivian Zoe. But that's just, this, again, a sampling of some of your, we'll get to see each of them, I think, in a larger frame as we go forward. But here's one. Tell us about this. Is beautiful.
Okay, so this is really the William Nearing pollinator garden at Harkness. And in the foreground, it's sort of washed out. That's probably my fault because I lightened them yesterday. In the foreground, we see Joe Pye weed. It's a view sort of looking southwest. They mow a path through the pollinator garden. This year, you couldn't even traverse the path because we'd had so much rain. It was so overgrown. But it's a great place to look for indigenous plants. So you see some goldenrod, you see in the distance, you see trees on almost the horizon line.
Right.
So
Yeah. So let's make a point right now of letting people know you have to go to the exhibition to see each piece in the exact hue and the exact coloration that Vivian painted it in. It's impossible. Some of these were photographs that I took, that she took. A photograph cannot do you justice. We had to put it into a PowerPoint
right.
presentation. When you're going to see the real thing when you go there, and that's very important. So let's go on to the next slide. This is love. This is a close approximation to what it looks like, I think, in the exhibition.
Right.
But again, keep in mind what I just said.
right. So this is a scene in Stonington, also looking, in the distance you see some houses, and as you approach any environment like this, sometimes you're presented with birds that sort of get startled and fly away. So the cormorant that you see over the water was flushed out of the marsh.
Okay, next. Oh, that's beautiful.
That's another, obviously, a scene from the marsh looking into the distance in Old Saybrook. That really, I shouldn't have lightened them, I think. Another view, I called it heron's view because it would be as if the heron were standing in shallow water, and in the distance, we see the houses in Madison.
Now, how do you decide? I'm assuming you're out in the world, you're in Old Saybrook, you're in Stone, wherever you are, and your eye catches a scene. Do you take a photograph of it?
Almost
do you take
always.
a sketch of it? What do you do?
Yes, to both of those. Almost always take a photograph because the light will change, and then obviously when you bring it home and you try to print it, the light still changes. It also flattens it. So sketches and watercolor or even pastel on plein air, which means in open air, to get sort of a sense of what the weather conditions were that day and what the colors are that you're really trying to capture.
Yeah. So how often do you work in plein air, outdoors? Do you take your easel and your
As little as possible,
Oh, okay, you don't.
only because I have such respect and admiration for people who paint almost even in the winter, because you have weather conditions, you have cars going by and splashing you, you have bugs in your paint, you have wind that knocks your canvas or painting support off the easel. Things dry much differently out in the open air, and most importantly, the light changes dramatically. Right. So you're constantly.
So what is it that catches your eye? What makes you feel that scene that you saw in Hammonasset is worthy of your? And how many hours are you spending on that piece of work, or in general?
That's a really good question, because I can, think, maybe an hour has gone by, and I look at the clock because my stomach is growling or something, and it's been like 3 hours. It's really absorbing. And one of the ways I tell what time it is I'm constantly listening to the radio. So, that when the program changes, I know it's a different time.
But if you're really concentrating on your work, because multitasking, I like to have the radio in the background, but I notice that when I'm really into something and concentrating on it, I don't hear the radio.
Me too.
Okay.
And a lot of times because sometimes what I am hearing is disturbing, so I change to listen to music.
So the amount of time can vary.
Answer that. It can vary.
It
can vary.
Okay.
Totally.
So, but I want to know, what is it about why that scene? Let's put that back up. That fly. Just tell us, what is it about that scene that captured your imagination? And again, tell us how one is to look at that painting. I'm following that water, and I'm following it to the horizon.
I wish the cord grass was more clearly visible. It's a little washed out, and again, that's probably my fault. But again, I go back to seeking to present, and I always feel inadequate to the task, to present light. So we have a sort of somewhat overcast day, but there are little suggestions of pink in the sky that gets magnified by the water. And the cord grass is reflected in the water. And I like to use, as much as possible, wherever possible, atmospheric perspective, which is where, when you look at something in the distance, in between the viewer and the object, there's all kinds of stuff in the air, particulate matter, and that reflects light in a different way, and it's sort of a cumulative effect. So the further away it gets, the more indistinct it gets, and the more likely the particulate matter is to kind of obscure the edges of the object, so it becomes less distinct. So I like to play with that. And there's something called scientific perspective. So we have atmospheric perspective, which I just described. And then there's scientific perspective, which is, in the old school, you would have drawn a lines to a vanishing point, whether that was off this way, that way, or straight in the middle. So in this piece, there is a soft, natural vanishing point, and it's more or less scientific perspective, because in the foreground, the grasses were very distinct to my eye. And as we get further and further away into the marsh, it's more sort of blurred color.
Nice. Okay, great. Let's go into the next one. Just give us an overview.
With the exception of the upper rightmost painting, these were all done this year with my garden going absolutely ballistic. So just so much fun this year. Everything was blossoming like crazy. When the sun was out, the color was really intense. And when you have bright sunshine, you get deep shadows, which I love. The contrast between the bright colors of the flowers and the dark blues of the shadows is so much fun to play with. So lots of material is here.
Everything except the top right is from your garden.
And the top right is a painting of dahlias from my neighbor's garden.
Okay.
And that was painted last fall. Obviously, the dahlias are just coming out now.
Beautiful. Okay, next. Oh,
that's a close-up of one of the ones from the other one.
And there's some representational things, flowers that are harder to paint than others. What's the hardest thing to do in a nature-type scene?
Well, this year the hardest for me were the daylilies that my friend Mary Lou had given me a couple of years ago, because they don't have, you know how a lot of daylilies have just sort of one layer of petals.
Are there not a lot of shading in them sometimes, or are there?
Yeah.
Yeah.
But the daylilies from Mary Lou have like 4 layers of petals. And they're a really amazing color, which unfortunately you can't really see too well. Which is, and one of the other paintings may be better. They're almost like a tangerine orange. They're not the orange of your typical side of the road daylilies that are more sort of almost fall leaf orange. These are it's an orange that I can't even describe. It's so both delicate and powerful at the same time. It's a fabulous color.
Let's go on next.
Those are very washed out.
Yeah, it's kind of, there you are. I'm sorry. There you are. I took this photo of you. I just wanted to show people that you had a lovely opening, and you had guests and food. And
people brought flowers or sent flowers.
You were duly happy and surprised by the lovely reception that you had that day. Okay, next. There you are in front of you, one that you've already shown, I think.
Yeah.
Okay, this one, I love this one. Tell us about this one.
So this is my neighbor's cottage. In the distance you see the house that he lives in, and then he's got this cottage, which actually is empty, sadly, he collects antiques, so it's filled with antiques, but he's got these great hydrangea in the front, and this sort of they're not stones, they're like terracotta pavers up to the door, and a neat trimmed boxwood path, on either side of the path, and a little picket fence. So this was one moment in June of not this year, not last year, but I think the year before, where there was this fabulous shadow from an oak tree across the road casting on the cottage, and this massive tree in the distance. So
nice.
Had a lot of fun with that.
Let's go to the next one. Is this the background of the heron painting?
No,
different area.
This is it's actually goes back to that William Nearing. So I am looking almost in the same direction, but I'm much closer. So down the path and looking toward the west. So if you were at Hammonasset and you were facing the Sound and you turned a hard right, and looked toward the houses that are on the other side of this. It's like a little stream that comes in. I don't even know the name of the stream. But again, there's a terrible shadow from my photograph that's there, sort of center right top. But you can see how the water throws moisture into the air, particularly in the left area, and makes everything get sort of hazy, that hazy feeling that you get when you look toward the distance.
Okay, next. Oh, this is lovely.
So this is a sunset, and it's actually from a woman who takes pictures and posts them on the social media site Nextdoor. And I always ask her, can I paint this? Because I don't want people to, think that I'm stealing their material. And she always says yes. And I don't know if there's another image, but I painted another one that she had submitted. She must have a great location. She's on somewhere in Waterford on Oswegatchie, so she's got a great view and great sunsets.
Beautiful. Okay.
So that's a close-up of one of the ones that was that that we saw the group on the wall.
Next.
So that's the dahlias, and the reason it's called Nothing Lasts Forever is because as I was trying to paint it, things kept dying.
Yes. Yeah.
And so you see the dried up ones. I pulled them out and just laid them on the table that I was working from.
Nice, lovely.
And that's
now. Who is Mrs. Burdick?
Mrs. Burdick is a woman who has this huge house and property in Ledyard. And I'm a member of the garden club, and through the garden club she got this message to us saying she had to get rid of all of her stuff because she had two shoulders that were no longer, she was in her 80s, two shoulders that were no longer good, and she couldn't take care of her property, and did we want to come and dig? So I went and dug, and then I told my neighbor about it, and we went together. So twice I went to get great stuff, and this is so washed out. I'm so sad that it's just, please people, go and see this painting because I'm proud of it. And I planted these, this is hydrangea, macrophylla, and I planted it about 3 years ago, and it did nothing. I had like pitiful little white starts, and this year it just went because we had the perfect year for hydrangea this year.
Okay, next.
And these are my stealth irises, and I call them stealth because you can sneak up on them and you get mostly their foliage, and you have to sort of find the blossoms sometimes.
I see a little Van Gogh in that painting.
Yeah, I could see that. I could see that.
Okay, next. Oh, now this one, I just want to start. And this is all from your property, is that right? A lot
yes.
of these from the tree. And there's a whole series that Vivian is going to talk about, starting with this one. And when I saw all of these different ones that she's painted, I thought of Monet and the Rouen Cathedral, because how many different versions did he do of that?
Well, he did that with haystacks. He did that with.
So Vivian is doing that with her trees.
So many things.
With her trees. So let's start and talk about how you saw each one differently and what phases of light or day.
So, so this is looking out the back of my house. I'm on a cove off the Thames. So there's so much reflection. It's really fun because you can play around with is that water, is that sky, where does the sky end, where does the water begin? And as you said, I look at the same trees, and sometimes I'm a little bit, turned toward the north, turned toward the northwest, a little turned toward the northeast. So the same trees in different seasons, in different light, different times of day, and from different angles can look completely different, like a different group of people.
Okay, so let's go to the next one and see.
That's actually a miniature, and I brought one, which I can show when we're back on
Yeah, we'll show
camera.
when we're back
It's about 4 by 3 inches. So just to give you an idea of its size, in slides, everything looks like it's about the same size, but this is a teeny weeny miniature. And again, the same trees, seen in different light with different reflections.
Right. Next one.
Another miniature.
But the same trees. Okay, here's
Right.
this one. This is the one that was featured on your
Invitation.
invitation.
Yep. This is Sunstream, an early morning with bright sunlight coming through the trees from the east. So you're looking at it sort of facing north, but the light is strongly coming from the east.
Okay, next.
That's Blue Morning, same trees.
Wow.
This time it's later in the morning, so the sun is moving around to the toward the south, and also later in the season. So it's still summer, but approaching fall.
Okay, next. Oh, there's just a scene at the exhibit, at the galleries.
And that lower left one is from the woman who posts her sunsets
Okay.
at Oswegatchie.
And you can just see, again, we're showing you photographs of the artwork, and on the lower right, we showed you that same piece of art in a much more muted and faded out photo, and this one is a better description of it, I think. But
in
again,
terms of color, yes.
once again, go and see them in person. There's a tremendous difference. Okay.
That's a very, very small painting. It's about 10 inches by 4 inches. So just to give, or maybe 5, just to give you an idea.
Now, where is that located?
That's actually looking northwest from my home. There's a bridge over Military Highway, and in the distance we see more of the cove, and then even further in the distance is the Thames River.
Nice. The colors are beautiful. Next.
Again, same bridge. Now it's winter.
There you are in the gallery again with some of your photos. That was, again, the day of the... This one is not as vibrant as it is in person. We're going to show some of your... Now, do you like to do more still life, which is this one and others?
I like to do... I think I prefer trees and landscape more than still lives, but if there's something about the material, whether it's a basket of apples or a box of tomatoes, which I have in the show. I don't have it in the show, but I have it in this PowerPoint. Sometimes the weirdest thing, looking straight down on a basket of apples, strikes me as appealing. A basket sitting on the grass, sort of.
Right. And we want to also explain, every one of your artwork in the show has a frame that you fit to match the piece.
I try to do that. Right.
And so we're showing some of because of, again, the angle in which I took photographs, other people took photographs. We've cut some of the frames off,
right.
So just to show the work of art. But I just want to ask you, again, good question. This is an interesting frame.
It's a great
How
frame.
do you choose the frame to match what you've painted?
Well, this frame, I can't even remember where I got it, but I absolutely loved it. It's got a veneer of a burled wood, very figural wood, and I thought it just really fit with that outdoorsy feeling of, if you went to pick apples. I recently started making my own frames, taught myself how to do it, so I'm very proud of myself because it can be really expensive. So I buy the framing material, the mold, which is finished, so I'm not doing the,
Right.
for example, the veneer or painting gilding on frames.
Right. So I guess I have a question. Can the frame change the whole look of the work?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. In fact, when I was at Slater Museum and in other positions where I've been in charge of juried shows and things, I will see artists submitting work to juried shows, and the piece is actually quite nice, but it's been placed in the completely wrong frame, or just a cheap frame, or or no frame at all. That's sort of there's a style called gallery wrap, where there is no frame,
Yeah,
but
I've
the
seen it.
edge of the
Yeah.
canvas becomes sort of the frame, but the artist really needs to continue the painting all the way around, and it really doesn't work on a stretched canvas that's stretched to be in a frame that has a narrow edge. It just doesn't look
So
good.
framing is important.
Framing is very
Framing is
important.
All right, let's go on to the next slide. So this is another little more vibrant photograph than Bushell's. Same idea.
Yep, same idea.
And next, here are
they're
your
my
green
tomato.
tomatoes. Did you ever have fried green tomatoes?
I've never eaten them, but these were this was the result of my attempt last year, because last year was not a good year for tomatoes. So I had them all laid out in my garage, hoping they would ripen, and they really didn't. So I threw them in a box, and I was thinking I would try to keep the vine and tie them up, but they started falling off the vine, so I threw them back in the box. So there they are in the box,
Okay.
and that's looking obviously straight down from
Next.
above.
Next. And again,
That's just the
another
wall,
view
yeah.
of the way the gallery looks. You'll see that when you go into the room. Next. Oh, I love this one. Now here, this is one that is not in this exhibition.
Not in this
But
ex-
Vivian has brought into this PowerPoint other paintings that she's submitted to other art shows.
Right. So it's totally unprofessional to install an exhibition and then have a piece that you might have submitted online get accepted. You can't walk into the gallery and
Right.
take it off and say, I'm going to
So
give it to
that's
somebody
beautiful.
else.
Where is that?
This is at Haley Farm in is that Stonington? Yeah, I think that's Stonington. It's sort of contiguous with Bluff Point. If you go for a walk at Bluff Point, you can take a leg off of it and end up at Haley
It's a
Farm.
beautiful autumn painting. Beautiful. And this is also gloaming. Where is that?
That's directly across the cove from me in the obviously
Next.
early evening.
Oh, this is beautiful. I think this is one of the last ones. Not one of the last ones. Then we have some of your early work after that. I love this one. How the clarity. Now this one looks a little different stylistically than your other
and
paintings.
this is about, I'm going to say, 3 or 4 years old. It was one of the first ones looking toward the themes that I painted shortly after retiring. We were still all kind of in not total lockdown, but you couldn't go anywhere, and I submitted this online to the Lyme Art Association's centennial exhibition, and it got in, and I was delighted by that. It's a large piece. It's about not about 3 by 4. It is 3 by 4
3 by 4 feet.
Yes.
Right. Yeah. Beautiful. Next. Okay, now we're going back because you wanted us to see your evolution, I guess.
Yeah,
How
or
you-
some early stuff. So this I painted, I think, when I was still an undergraduate. So this is my dad painted from a photograph, and I think I painted this around my first year in art school at UConn.
Your dad had an interesting history. He was born in Germany.
Yes, he
and
was
then
born
as
in
a
Cologne.
teenager, he realized what was coming.
Right.
Nazis
There was
were coming,
no.
and he left to go to Israel.
Right. He said to his
Palestine then. It
right,
wasn't
Palestine,
Israel, yeah.
exactly. When he was 14, he said to his parents, "There's no future for me here," and he went off on his own.
And of course, you're also well known in the community for your mother was an Auschwitz survivor.
That's right.
So it's interesting. Let's go back to the next painting. This is...
So speaking of my mother, not this one. This I painted my. Actually, I thought it was 1975, but this might have been earlier, a little bit earlier than that. But these, I was more, I would say, more impressionistic when I was younger, which I think is sort of interesting because a lot of artists work the other way around, partly because their eyesight begins to diminish, so their work is it has less clarity, and they're also, I think they feel they have less time.
Oh, they become more impressionistic as they age.
As they age, right, as they age.
And you're the reverse of that.
I've been the reverse. Yeah. Maybe that'll change back. So my mother had very few documents and artifacts and things like that from her youth, but she had some pictures from just after the war in Germany, and there were these roads that were lined with trees. You'd look down the road and there would be tree. And if you travel in France, you will see roads between towns that are like that, where there's just rows and rows of along the edge, and farmland beyond, but along the edge of the road, these trees that just seem to go on forever. In fact, there's a tree colonnade off Route 12 where the Mohegan tribe is trying to develop a water park, and it's a huge construction site now. And I'm going to go there and take some photographs of those trees just south of the cemetery on Route 12.
Okay, was that it? Was that the last one?
I think that's the last one.
All right. Well, let's just finish our discussion. So I'm the viewer. I'm walking into that gallery. Do you want me to feel or see something special, or do you want me? You hands off. It's up to you, Sheila. You decide how you want to wade your way into these paintings. Do you have an idea of what I should be getting from the painting?
I think the answer to that is yes. I think whatever you are getting, either emotionally or purely aesthetically, is entirely up to you. If someone wants to ask me questions about what I was trying to achieve, I'm more than happy to answer that. But I don't want to sort of steer or even ruin the experience that a person is having with an object. Having said that, when I go to a museum, I love to read the labels that curators have written about certain pieces, partly because it gives you an idea of where in that artist's oeuvre this piece fits, and where they might have been living at the time, or what they might have been experiencing in their lives, and that sort of stuff.
So for you, this gallery, this show, what part of your life's experiences and your art history is this? What's the next? And then I guess the next question is, what's your next phase? Are you moving on to something different?
I don't think I'm moving on. I think I want to get back to some of those trees, because I got very, very, very sidetracked by the flowers, which were just spectacular. But I do want to get back to the trees. And at the same time, you got to be careful of not being boring, and you want to be less predictable and less expected in what you're doing. So, but I hope that I'm communicating a certain level of joy in my visual life. I mean, there's so much opportunity right now to be despondent and morose and unhappy. But I do have to say, even though there's nothing more intimidating than a blank canvas, it really is a complete and total escape, and you're really working in a bubble of your own thoughts and creativity focused on one thing, which is really fabulous.
Well, so you've brought us back to where I started.
Right.
With the world that we live in, and how you can immerse yourself in art, in beauty, in a soothing quality, brings happiness and life,
right.
joy,
Yep.
which we're not always feeling around
right.
now. And that's
exactly.
the wonderful thing about what art can do.
Yep. And I also want to say that artists who draw our attention to inequities and injustices and things that are not the best about our society deserve tremendous credit. I have tremendous respect for people who use their artistic talent, their training, and their minds to do that kind of work. It's just not been my thing.
Okay. Well, as someone who's been to the exhibit, it's beautiful. The pictures we showed you today are not exactly 100% representative. You have to see them in person. So let's again tell you, at Three Rivers at the gallery. It's very easy to get to once you get to Three Rivers in Norwich. Everyone should know where that is. Off of,
it's easy to get to.
What street is it off of?
What's the name of that?
Well, New London Turnpike
New London
follows all the way through,
right.
And then you make a left turn into Three Rivers, go all the way to the entrance around the front, and walk up the steps right after you get in. And
there's
it's right
also
there.
an elevator. There's an elevator.
Oh, there's also an elevator.
Yep.
You can walk up the steps.
It's completely accessible.
And you can commune with nature, with Vivian's beauty, and have a respite from the tough world that we're living in that we hope will get better. Okay? Thank you, Vivian, very much. Any final thoughts?
You did it great. My pleasure, entirely.
Okay, it's great for you to be here. We'll see you all next time on Talk Back. Bye. I said it right.